Hey everyone, we have another typology interview. We have Chase Joseph here, CS Joseph. How's it going, man?
Hey, I'm a little exhausted, but hanging in there.
Awesome.
Been working hard, or
Yeah.
hardly working, one of the two.
um, I wanted to say first off that I really appreciate the work you've been doing the whole way through. You're one of the first people, I guess, on YouTube that was really starting up the typology stuff, and a lot of people I run into, you're like a gateway drug, I guess, for them. Like they came into typology through you. You're really accessible. Um, I want to know a little bit about your history and why YouTube, and what was the landscape of typology at the time you started?
Well, the landscape of typology at the time, just there's so many people saying incorrect things. And honestly, the only person in YouTube that actually had any remote credibility whatsoever was Dave Powers. A few
No
years
videos.
ago, yeah, a few years ago, like I watched like 3 of his videos, and I was like, okay, yeah, this guy, he basically gets it for the most part, especially like from a cognitive function point of view,
Yeah.
I enjoyed the 3 videos that I watched years back. But I mean, him and I differ in a lot of ways. In some ways, we actually have a lot of similarities that most people don't even realize, but that's a whole other thing. But that was kind of the landscape. But I didn't really enter YouTube or any of that from like a point of view of trying to compete with anyone, like at all. And it's
Mhm.
funny because I've gotten so many asks for collabs by the other YouTubers, and I've refused all of them, like
Yeah,
for the
you
most
refuse me,
part.
man.
I did. I did. I refused to probably twice. My bad. But
No, it's all good, man. I understand 100%.
the reason why is because the team and I had a doctrine that we put together for how like we handle public appearances and whatnot, and it was we were more trying to focus our public appearances or me going on shows and collabing with non MBTI, non typology content. And I did a bunch of those. Like I went on Grimerica and I went on Patriots Soapbox or like all these other rando podcasts and whatnot to just
Right.
talk about the science and not actually, but in terms of like collabing with other YouTubers, I only did it one time, and that was on the Love Who channel, and it was like once, and that
Right.
was interesting. But other than that, I haven't really done it, and I've just kind of really it just didn't really mean much because the thing is that when I'm trying to explain like typology and whatnot, there's either a complete total agreement or there's a complete total disagreement. And it's like everyone ends up trying to ultimately turn it into a debate. And it's like,
Mhm.
I don't want to debate anyone. Like, I mean, because my philosophy is listen to what I'm saying. Don't believe what I say. Go use what I say and prove whether or not it's true or false. If you don't understand how you could prove it's true or false, then come ask me questions. I'll help you out. But other than that, like I'm trying to create an environment of self-discovery for people to just kind of understand, like, hey, here's this tool you could use, the TypeGrid. It's better than the tests. It's like 100% accurate, provided you know how to use it. You have to take some skill to use, but once you do it, your life will be better. Trust me. And then that's kind of where it goes. But when I first started, it was not about competing or being disruptive or whatever. It's more of like I have to do this because like I was gonna die. I was gonna die of liver failure, and I didn't have anything legacy oriented set up. And I'm like, well, I knew all about this, and I know my son will be super good at it one day, but he's not going to be good at it because he's a very small child at this point because he's only like 6 years old when I started, and I'm just like, well, his type is the natural type to like understand and achieve mastery with the science in general for the most part, because my mentor is the same type as my son. They're both INFJs.
Yeah,
And
so let's talk about that, like your
sure.
mentorship and stuff, like how you got into typology. Because I guess I caught from another interview you did that you were just speaking nonsense at the beginning, and then one of your mentor, like,
Yeah.
yeah, something like that.
Yeah, so I started studying this stuff at 21 when I was 21. So this was 12 years ago. So I've been doing this for like 12 years. And I studied hard. I bought the books, the official MBTI books. I read all those. I did a little bit of socionics reading as well. I actually, contrary to popular belief, I actually love socionics. I absolutely love socionics. But I'm also very critical towards the parts of it that I disagree with. But that's how I am about any system that's out there, But I started studying it at 21 in a bid to save my marriage. I was married to an ESFP, didn't really know it at the time. And I was trying so hard to do anything to figure out how to fix my marriage. That's the whole reason I did this, is just to save my marriage. And instead of saving my marriage, what happened was I ended up understanding her and understanding like her needs. And I realized there was no way impossible that I was ever going to meet her needs. And she was already not meeting my needs. And I'm just like, I need to take responsibility for this. So one thing led to another, and we ultimately got divorced. But we did that sooner than later because we didn't want our bad marriage to really negatively impact the children. And at least ever since we've made the decision to do this, the children have been thriving. They've been better. My daughter, she's only 5, but she gets so much attention from her stepfather now, because he's able to meet her emotional needs in a better way than I am, whereas I'm able to meet her perceptual needs, in a better way that he is. So it's this tag team parenting thing that we do, and now my daughter's like reading 2 grade levels ahead. Like her academic achievement is skyrocketed, as well as her athletic achievement as well. And my son has just gone so creative now, and he's getting into music and martial arts. It's excellent. But most people see divorce as a really, really bad thing. And yes, it is. It is a really, really bad thing. It's a really hard thing. But the way that my ex-wife and I like handled it, we were able to pull it off in an equitable manner, and it was only possible because of the study. However, well, 6 years later, or five years later, when I was 26, I was working for a man, doing engineering for him. He had me work for him at a Fortune 500 company. I was doing work there, and then he had me do all these other projects on the side, and he had another guy who was working for him. And I ended up in the Copper Building in Bellevue, Washington, on the 22nd floor, delivering like a sales pitch. I was a sales engineer, so I focus on virtualization, VMware, whatever. And it was a sales situation, and they all cracked open some beers. It was a Friday. We were all hanging out. And, I'm like, hey, what do you guys, I did, that meme of like, so what do you know about the MBTI? You know what I'm saying? Like, it was like that awkward moment. Right. And then I told them, about cognitive functions or whatever. Well, my coworker was in the room, and he's like, and in front of everybody, he's like, you don't know what you're talking about. They're like, what? So then he got up and he started whiteboarding out why I didn't know anything what I was talking about. And he absolutely verbally destroyed me in front of these men. And by the way, we did not get the sale because of the situation.
Who is this? This guy became your mentor, right? Who is this guy?
His name's Robert Bryant. Fantastic fellow. Good old Robert Bryant. He's an ESTP. He still thinks he's an ISTP to this day, but he's really an ESTP. But yeah, he was very critical, and he just exposed me and basically said, "You're a charlatan." And that's what ESTPs do. They expose people for being charlatans. And he's like, "You're a charlatan and you don't even know it. And here's why." It freaked me out. Well, the following day, we were driving together out to Yakima, and I didn't want to go because I'm like, this guy he's just going to destroy me again. But I went, and then he's like, "Okay, here's the situation. You're homeless right now, and you're still trying to figure this out, but at least you're working. But let me do you a solid and he told me, like, you're weak and I don't respect you." He told me that. And I was like, okay, you're weak. I don't respect you. And because I know you're weak and I don't respect you, it's likely why you have such a bad marriage is because, she obviously knows. Oh yeah. He went for it, man.
Yeah.
He went for it. And I'm like, as much as I want to disagree with you, I can't disagree with you. So, okay, I'll listen to what you have to say. And he's like, all right, well, here's the deal. I will teach you, but you need to listen, and you need to listen well. I'm like, okay. So we made this arrangement where I became his apprentice, essentially. We made an arrangement.
And why is he a mentor? Where did he get all this from?
He got it from my other mentor.
Right, even bigger.
Yeah, he got it from my INFJ mentor. So he actually studied under my INFJ mentor, which is interesting because my INFJ mentor is significantly younger than him. But he actually got it from my.
Can't say his name.
No, I really can't, out of respect for him. I have said it a few times on my YouTube channel. Some people can pick it up, but the reason why is that I don't want to disrespect him, because he values his privacy extremely, as most INJs do.
Sure.
So, but
and where did he get it from then?
See, that's the thing. I don't really know actually where he got it from, but I do have a theory. Have a theory. My theory is that he actually he heavily, I believe, this is my theory, and I don't know if this is true. Other than him being an autodidact, and he researched Keirsey and Barron's, and because he did a lot of class projects in high school, just because he read all these books in high school and then did papers on them. But it didn't start to really click for him, I think, until potentially, this is where it gets to very theoretical, potentially where he started, I think he was watching EJ R&D a lot. And I think EJ R&D in his YouTube channel before he disappeared, EJ R&D's real name is Jay McKee. And Jay was doing a lot of work on YouTube talking about these things. And Jay was somewhat aware of the Berenstain approach as well as socionics. And my INFJ mentor studied socionics pretty heavily, as well as Barron's and Keirsey, Montgomery, Hunziker, John Beebe. I actually got introduced to John Beebe through my INFJ mentor, not my ESTP one. And
I see. Okay. So you actually met with John Beebe then?
Yeah, actually, it's funny. I met with John Beebe in person about, gosh, what was it? A year ago, 9 months ago? Or it was September of last year or August of last year, one of those two. I met him in person. It was amazing. It's weird because when I walked in the room, like, he instantly knew who I was. I was like, whoa, okay. That was not... because I wasn't planning on showing up. It's kind of last minute. Say again?
Are you still in touch with John Beebe? Doctor, maybe?
Moderately. I do have his email and I can contact him. But like, I even bought his book when I was there, and he actually signed it and whatnot. But like, on the way out from his presentation, which was an exquisite presentation. It was excellent. On the way out, like, he came up to me and he's like, and he's just thanking me for what I was doing and helping people understand cognitive attitudes and whatnot. And in front of like one of his team members who he had there, he's like, oh, this is Chase, C.S. Joseph. He's my colleague. And I was like, whoa, hello, So it was kind of cool to get that kind of recognition from Dr. Beebe. Yeah, I've always enjoyed his work, especially when it was first presented to me by my INFJ mentor. Yeah.
So I'm really curious about why you chose his model over all the other models to start working from, I guess, and then also like what you think about archetypes in general, like the archetype model in general.
Okay. Yeah. Sure. So the reason why I chose Dr. Beebe is because. So let's talk about how we have inductive reasoning versus deductive reasoning, right? So in order, the MBTI, because it's like a test, the letter dichotomies, whatnot, that's all based on inductive reasoning. And you have people out there like, for example, Ty Lopez. He's an ENFP. He's one of the most critical of MBTI in general. He's telling people, take the Hexaco test, take the Big Five test, ignore MBTI. And he has this huge list of criticisms about them. And the thing is I agree with his criticisms. He's actually correct about it.
Yeah, I think everyone in the community would agree that MBTI is not the system that we want. I mean, we're all in the cognitive functions here. We all know that MBTI is just an approximation and not a very good one at the moment. Yeah.
You said it exactly. It's all about approximation. And my mentors and I became very frustrating. So we had to make an assumption at first, but then testing out the assumption or the hypothesis, basically. But the hypothesis at the beginning was that the type grid is 100% true. It is pure fact, and you cannot. It is truth. Period. End of story. So, assuming it's truth, we do a lot of testing with it. But in order for the type grid to actually be true, that means also Dr. John Beebe's work has to be true, and his approach to cognitive functions.
Right.
And in order for the type grid to be true, that means Dr. Linda Behrens also has to be true at the same time.
Yeah.
So, but in testing with Dr. Linda Behrens, also Stephen Montgomery has to be true. A little bit of Mark Hunziker in there, but it's mostly Stephen Montgomery, Linda Behrens, and John Beebe. Those three people with a little bit of Keirsey and Plato, but I prefer Montgomery over Keirsey every time. When taking all those pieces in place, the type grid is like, well, it works, and it works 100% of the time. That's why. So that's why Dr. Beebe's definitions ends up becoming, sacrosanct to a point when it comes to the cognitive attitudes, and his understanding of cognitive functions and cognitive attitudes, right down to his definitions of cognitive functions, except I've just taken his definitions and turned them into like layman's terms, basically, so they're more accessible.
Can I just dig into your logic there a little bit? So just the parallel from, let's say, physics, right? So you have Einstein's model, right, which was based on Newton's model, right? But Einstein sort of overturns Newton. So like Newton doesn't have to be true for Einstein to be true. So why, in this case, is your model predicated on the fact that other people are true? Can they not be false and your model just be true? Or your model just work?
I'm so glad you're asking. Okay, so the reason why is because what we've done is we've taken all of the content by Dr. Linda Behrens, all the content from Beebe and Montgomery and Keirsey and whatnot. And it's like, okay.
Or you've thrown out half of it? Have you thrown out half of it, or you took it all to
We've thrown out, for each of them, we've thrown out a significant percentage. John B, we've probably retained about 60 to 70%. Linda Behrens, we've probably thrown out 80% from her. Stephen Montgomery, we've thrown out probably at least 40 to 60% from him, but probably about 40%. Mark Hunziker, we've probably thrown out about 70% for him. And Keirsey...
Sorry, man, that's my net that cut out there.
All good. So from a Keirsey standpoint, though, we realize that Keirsey's work is actually just a rehash of Plato. Honestly, it truly actually is. You read Plato's Republic, and then you actually find out that the four temperaments, according to Keirsey, is just a rehash of what Plato was teaching people. And Plato's an INFJ, so I guess that makes a lot of sense, too.
I guess also OP does the same thing. It's just a rehash of a whole bunch of other things.
Yeah.
So then your previous statement is false then. Like, so all of Beebe's work isn't true if you didn't take all of it. And all of, right?
Right. Well, yeah. So at first, so it's a process. At first, we're looking at all the input coming from each of these different psychologists, basically, and then we're slapping it together. Huh?
Who's the we here? You say we all the time. Who's the we?
My mentors and I, basically.
Okay. So you guys were basically pinging off of each other, figuring this out together.
Kind of.
Okay.
Honestly, the origins of the type grid, I'm not entirely privy to. I've improved it, and I've added additional vectors to it because all it is a four-dimensional abacus from a calculus-based algorithmic logic. But the only vectors that we were using at the time was Linda Behrens' interaction styles and Keirsey's temperaments in order to use the type grid, and we knew that was true. But then when we look at it, when applying socionics principles, then you can start using quadras, and then using Dr. Beebe's principles, you can start using cognitive functions and cognitive axes, as well as because he explained cognitive axes. He was the first one to explain cognitive axes, which is excellent. And then I started adding things like cognitive orbit and some other additional vectors. Even the Riemann dichotomies actually apply directly to type grid, which is amazing. Mm-hmm. But it's just how they're interpreted to be able to make it work. But like I said, over time, it had to be refined, and some things had to throw out, some things we had to keep. But in terms of like the core message of each psychologist in play, and like what we consider their magnum opuses, their best work, each of them, all of their best work, basically, at least what we consider is their best work, I guess. A little subjective there, but at that point, the TypeGrid became the TypeGrid as to what it is right now. But like I said, I inherited it from my mentors. They came up with it themselves. I was their apprentice, honestly. And then I refined it further and took it to the next level. So we have this like chain of custody. But in terms of the chains of custody, I don't know who taught my INFJ mentor directly, other than I think it's 60% autodidact and 40% EJ R&D. So that's as near as I could tell.
What about you today when you're coming up with your ideas? Who do you come up with ideas with? Do you do it on your own? Do you ping it off of friends?
I read a lot of books.
Okay.
I don't really talk to anyone else about it. Well, that's not true. There is one person I do talk to things about, and that's Mr. Jay Ackley. And he's been on my show every now and then. Like, I'll just call him up, be like, what do you think about this? But for the most part, I usually just don't. And the reason why is because I've had like so many ideas stored up for so many years. Like, I have a little mind map on my phone, remember? And I spend my time thinking about this all the time and processing and doing, mind experiments, similar to how like what Einstein would do when he's coming up with the theory of relativity. And then I like meet people randomly, and sometimes I'll just kind of like, I don't know, I probably come off like a creeper or whatnot as I'm in these coffee shops having random conversations with random people, asking them questions about themselves. So I'll type them from a distance, and I'll come to them and have conversations with them. They have no idea I'm even like psychoanalyzing them, gathering information from this particular person. Then I go to another person, and I write notes down. They think I'm just texting somebody during the conversation. That's not really what I'm doing. I just move on and I study, and then I study people and whatnot. Or I'll even interview them. They don't even know I'm interviewing them or whatever.
Yeah, that's another question. Like, so how are you sure that the TypeGrid actually works? It's actually accurate. What kind of cross checks do you have? Are you doing double blind typing? Is there some accountability to reality in some way?
Yeah, there is. So basically, is that I always make sure to share my sources with people if they ask, and you can go to csjoseph.life/reading, click psychology, and then that's like my entire bibliography for everything I talk about right there. I'm about to add an Enneagram book to it, actually. I've been avoiding talking about Enneagram, but that's like another conversation from the other day, or maybe later, I don't know. But the thing is, it's because I'm not really well studied on it. That's why, like, I'm not going to talk about something I'm not studied on. But in terms of like, it's basically, if we can give somebody the TypeGrid, teach them the basic concepts, and then see how they use it, and then compare that to how we use it, basically, it's generally how it goes. I've seen my INFJ mentor is probably the best person to do this, because as an INFJs are just really good at teaching people. They just are. And he would teach people how to use it, and then we'd watch them and observe them using it from a distance, or even like adjacent to them, like in conversations. Because we'd go to like the AFK Tavern in Everett, Washington, for example, which is a fantastic place, and we'd practice and do things like that. But and I'd also order a Blackbeard's Revenge. It's my favorite drink, but no one knew that for some reason, but random. But anyway, this is what we would do. And it's basically just constant experimenting. So like, as a TI user, and him as a TI user as well, we have this thing where mentally we have to like verify that it works. And it's like someone like says a new idea, that potentially challenges it, or it's something that we come to realize, hey, this new idea actually is true. Well, but does it match the TypeGrid? And then we find out, oh, it does. Oh, okay, great. And it's still like, as much as we keep trying to test against the TypeGrid and try to basically break it, we've not been able to. We really haven't been able to. That's the issue.
You've refined it any further? There's no refining process at all to the TypeGrid?
There is a refining process. The refining process is taking additional. So again, treat the TypeGrid like an abacus. It's an abacus, right? So treat it like an abacus. And the thing is that no matter what vector or which way that you start using an abacus to doing a calculation, what angle or however way you use the abacus, it still has to come up with the same result at the end. And then you flip it over, do the same thing, but from a different direction. It still has to come up with the same result at the end. That's how you know it works. So in order for the type grid to be true as an abacus and be treated like an abacus,
it's like a cross check.
You have to be able to do a different input to get the same result. That's how, because it itself is TI, because it itself is deductive reasoning, which is TI. It's introverted thinking. That's deductive reasoning. TE, extroverted thinking, that is inductive reasoning, where you're applying and adding things to equal something. That is inductive. But deductive is you assume everything is true, and then you just subtract. Say again?
Where did you get this definition from of TI versus TE?
It's basically John Beebe, essentially. Okay. Is the initial introverted thinking, extroverted thinking approach that we use. Like, that's the foundation. But there's also some other sources that don't really know about typology that also are explaining things. And I take this back to like the Greeks. We're talking about ethos and pathos, mythos, even though mythos is actually technically expert intuition. But that's more Carl Jung. Carl Jung talks about it. There was like a transcripted lecture that Carl Jung gave a long time ago, talking about logos and ethos and pathos and whatnot. I forgot what it's called, but there's a little bit in there too that we utilize from that information to move
forward. I'm wondering, after you type someone, okay, so you have these definitions. There's like a chicken and an egg effect, right?
Yes.
So let's say you're able to type someone consistently correctly.
Yes.
Have you ever gone back and asked them what his functions are, how they actually work, or in order to refine your understanding better, or you're just inheriting that understanding?
I have gone back. Like I mistype people, like it happens. Like, especially like it's funny, a member of my audience recently like calculated out like my mistypes, like his point of view of like how often I mistype people and whatnot. And he thinks, Chase, I think you're about 73% accurate. And I'm like, you know what? In terms of the live streams, I think you're right, because live streams, I'm being really rushed on them. But the thing is that if I get a bunch of people who are writing in the comments, this bullshit, that guy's not way that way, and I'm like, I will verify, I'll make a video, I'll release it. And I actually verified, here's an example, Drake. I typed Drake as an ISTP, and then like, I had a bunch of people in my Facebook, including my wife, and I'm like, okay, hold on. I'll go verify it again. I'm like, oh yeah, he's an ESTP. My bad, and I'll tell everyone, hey, I did this wrong, and here's why I did it wrong, etc. I also did a lecture one time called How to Prevent Mistyping at the end of season 15. And I explained, yeah, I mistyped this person, but here's why. And I explained the whole process of the mistyping that actually happened. So it can happen. But here's the thing. If you just apply the type grid and you test it from every possible angle on the type grid, because the type grid is like, oh yeah, I could type someone with interaction styles or temperaments, great. Or, oh, I could type someone with quadras, or, ooh, I could type someone with cognitive functions or cognitive axes, basically, according to Beebe, etc. Or I could use run-in dichotomies. There's so many different ways. But here's the thing. You type somebody one way, but you have so many other vectors to use. If you just test against all of them, you still have to get the same result, right? So you look at that, and you can actually check your work on the abacus. You could check your work on the type grid. It's so great to be able to do that. The problem is that the amount of different combinations and different vectors that you could use the type grid to get the same accurate result. Because if it doesn't match, you know of your problem. You know you made a mistake somewhere. So then you start over. Or
what about intersystem comparisons? So like comparing your types to, let's say, socionics typing people, or to other MBTI practitioners, or even to OP typed people. Does it hold up most of the time?
It does hold up, provided there's one thing that people have to agree on. There's one thing that people have to agree on, and they have to agree on what the actual definition of the functions are themselves. Oftentimes, people, I've noticed, get the definition of NI versus NE backwards. That's very common.
That's something I want to get to, but let's say you're using your type grid. You're not actually using the definitions to type people. You're using a bunch of different other things.
Right, but in order for the type grid to work, or at least cognitive access theory, according to John Beebe, when applied to the type grid, like for example, if we know someone's an FE plus TI user, because all TI users have FE in their top 4 functions,
Right.
we've just eliminated 8 of the types. It's an elimination game. It's literally like the type grid is a game. You're just eliminating, right?
So it's really
you have to know
predicated
what
on
that.
your understanding. Then what you're saying, it's really predicated that you have the functions defined correctly.
Correct.
So like, that's a huge
That's
thing.
what I'm saying. Exactly. And in order for it to work with other people, you have to agree that the functions are the same. But the thing is that most people don't agree that the functions are the same. And my man Taurus and I maintain that we have the true definition, and most people don't. This is why I give my
That's an extraordinary claim, right? So like
it is extremely extraordinary, and quite frankly, it sounds biased and arrogant. Quite frankly, it's very extraordinary. But I keep trying to test against it, and I just can't. Looking at especially when you're looking at the definition of mythos, right? That's extroverted intuition. But oftentimes people define extroverted intuition as what introverted intuition actually is. And they think that, all of these, NI heroes, these INJ types are very, very, soothsayerish or prophet-like and whatnot. And they're actually not. They're really not, and that's why we have people like Ty Lopez out there, because it's like, wow, people in the typology community don't even agree on their own definitions, and they expect us to take this test and live our lives like it. This is crap. You can't do that. And that's where all this criticism from people outside of the MBTI blogosphere are criticizing us, because we don't have a consistent definition that we rely on. And that's the problem.
Yeah, that's a problem across the whole typology community. I'm seeing that the definitions between different systems are just different. That's just the way it is. Yeah. I'm wondering if you have any idea on, maybe we can meet each other halfway, or maybe there's a process in which we can examine the people after they've been typed and see if they're actually using these functions.
There is one way. There's one way that I think we actually can. But it's going to take some work, and it's something that I am working on right now. I was handed a lot, but I don't want to do it by myself.
Yeah, you can't do it by yourself. That's
so
the thing.
there's
when
one
you do it by yourself, you'll be accused of favoring your own system, right?
Well, yeah, I get accused of that all the time. But from my point of view, I'm okay with being accused of that. I'm perfectly okay with that, because I have this policy of, you can either adopt my system or not. It doesn't affect me. I don't care if you do or not. It's like, just test it and see if it works. If it works, what does it matter? Experiment with it. Try to prove it wrong. Work it. And everyone I try to do that with, they're like, okay, yeah, it actually works. I'm like, okay, fair enough.
So you would say the ultimate test for it is if it works. If it works.
Exactly. That's, it's very pragmatic. But here's the thing. I want to go further than that. So there's two strategies that I'm going to employ in the future to do this. Our personality assessment, because this is where I'm like, oh, Chase, you're a hypocrite. We're releasing our own personality assessment. I'm very anti-test, but my test is different because it forces the user to go through a deductive reasoning process with the type grid to come up with their answer, instead of this typical inductive reasoning that the MBTI test or any other tests out there follow. And we have that beta right now, and the beta is out at csjoseph.life/members. Silver member, you get to become in the beta, but the live version will be made available for free to everyone, hopefully on June 1st. That's our target right now.
Okay, but send me the links. I'll put them in the description.
Oh, sure. I don't know where to do that.
Well, afterwards.
Okay, fair enough.
I have a couple of links just to your YouTube channel and your website at the moment.
It's all good, man. But the point is that we're releasing this test, but how are we gonna? And that's one way. So when anyone takes our test, and the thing is that we want people to take the test multiple times, and like they could take it top to bottom, bottom to top. They can actually start, because the whole point of the test is you answer the one question that you know for a fact is true, because you're not going to know all the questions. You're not going to know. You just focus on what you do know. How
is this self-reporting different from your difficulties with MBTI then?
The reason why is because the test verifies against itself.
Okay.
It's the same abacus-like thinking.
Huh? MBTI doesn't do that?
Not really, because it's following that inductive reasoning model of qualification, whereas the test assumes you are everything, and your job with the test is just to subtract the things that you know you absolutely aren't. And then it comes up with an answer. The thing is that you can start it at any angle you want. And so if you take the test from every possible angle, you'll realize that you'll keep coming up with the same answer, and that's the way it is. And then,
so who came up with this test then? Who did you work with? Other people? Did you coordinate?
I did it myself. I've been working on the algorithms behind the test for years, and
are you testing it against your own typings, I guess, to verify it?
Yes, I have. And in a few cases, I will admit that my own self-typings were a little bit incorrect, but looking at there and actually going to the person and like, hey, here's a video where I define what this type is, and here's a video of the type from before. Which is it? And then they're like, oh, yeah, it's this one. It's like, okay, that's what the test. And I'm like, so why did it come off this way? And they talk to me. And then, like, so for example, they're like, well, I was too scared. You're really intimidating, they're telling me. Or there's a lot of other people around. Sometimes people are afraid of judgment and whatnot. And people adjust themselves based on the situation because of either fear or worry that they have and whatnot. Yeah. And it's just not them being honest with themselves or honest with others because of that fear or that worry that they have. So
that makes sense about the fear and the worry. But what really is going on here is something like it's a lot of puzzle pieces that have to fit together perfect. Like if you're wrong about your video about what the type is, then that'll throw the whole thing off. If you're wrong about the TypeGrid, it'll throw it off. If you're wrong about the test, it'll throw it off. So
you're right. Luckily,
perfect.
Luckily, within Foresight's dynamics, which is what we're calling the system, luckily within that, it's consistent. It's not divided against itself. That's a good part. So we don't have that problem, but it's still there's still a learning curve with how to actually use it for identifying someone's type. But again, that's why the test actually has the teaching materials embedded in the test.
Right.
And you can actually learn as you go, which is nice.
So you're coming up with a lot of ideas all the time. You're like generating a lot of ideas.
Yes.
How do you test yourself, verify your ideas to make sure that they're not just wild and out there? How do you verify that they're real? Because like NE especially is very famous for not being grounded, for coming up with like these wild ideas that could or couldn't be true, and they need to be refined somehow.
So between thought experiments, experimenting on people that I meet in public, every now and then I'll have a conversation with one of my mentors just to like see like where things are coming from there, as well as I'll talk to Mr. Jay Ackley, for example, and we'll have these conversations and be like, okay, is this actually accurate? So for example, there was 2 theories that I had that were absolutely incorrect, and I actually presented them both in one of them is someone else's theory, and then I'm like, no, this is actually the correct way. And that was earlier in season 17, but I had taught everyone the other person's theory the entire time. And that's in season 17, episode 3. And that's where I'm talking about genders and types, because oftentimes people think there's the anima-animus theory. I've realized that, how it approaches gender is incorrect. And we talked about other people, and that came, my own INFJ mentor actually challenged that a long time ago. I didn't believe him. He challenged it. And then after a while, he didn't believe it either. But I kept going back to it because I'm like, there's got to be something there. There's got to be something to that. And then we found out, yes, there was. So that theory of anima, animus, and gender is not, we realized that this wasn't correct, especially when you're applying it to Eastern philosophy, when to Taoism and Yin and Yang teaching, in order to understand how the sacred masculine, the sacred feminine, and then apply that to ancient Egyptian sacred masculine, sacred feminine. Those ideas are actually the same. And then applying it to anima animus, then it works.
It's really dependent on the mythology, what masculine and feminine means. I've seen a lot of different
exactly. But they matched, so at least they had an agreement. So we moved from there to be able to come to that point. But then beyond that,
the fact they have an agreement, that makes it more true in your eyes?
No, not necessarily, but it just means that it was a place that we could at least start to test with. Right. Because these 2 cultures, as Carl Jung puts it, when it comes to extrovert intuition, cultures end up having the same ideas, the same stories, the same arcs of their characters and whatnot within their pantheons, etc., even though the cultures have never had any contact. whatsoever, right? Ancient Egyptian religion versus the Taoist point of view of today.
This is the whole hero's journey with Campbell and Young.
Yeah.
A lot, yeah.
Which John Beebe goes heavily into Joseph Campbell as well. I'm not a fan of Joseph Campbell, but I also have to admit that he's correct. So it is what it is. But this thing happens, and when you have two cultures that have never had contact with each other, still having the same point of view about the sacred masculine, sacred feminine, we know that's special compared to other points of view. So we were able to use that as a starting point, as our input, before we logicked from there. Because again, like logic, as powerful it is, it's not the end all be all, because if logic has the improper inputs at the beginning, it will explode in your face and it won't work. And then you have to start over. And I've had to start over so many times in my life.
Because it's not working.
Especially when I thought I was an INTJ when I wasn't, Right. So it's painful. But
how did you get typed? Who typed you as ENTP?
My INFJ mentor did. He thought I was an INTJ for the longest time until we actually met each other face to face for the very first time. And he's like, dude, you're the only one initiating at this table. We were at I think it was like Thai Spoon or something like that. In Redmond, Washington, at a Thai restaurant that I took him after they drove out there from the Midwest, because that's where they lived. And him and his family were there, and we all went to dinner, and it was great. And then he's like, dude, you're the loudest person at the table, and you think you're an introvert? This is terrible. No, you're not. And it started my identity crisis, which lasted 6 weeks. It was extremely painful, trying to because then I realized how much I misjudged other people, how much I was mistyping people. I felt really, really responsible for all of that. And I'm I care about accuracy more than anything. So I had to do a lot of apologizing. I had to reach out to a lot of people, take responsibility for it. It was a very painful process. But after 6 weeks, and I remember the moment I finally came to the conclusion that I was an ENTP. I was standing in Leavenworth, Washington, on top of literally in the town, walking in the street between the hotel and this awesome bratwurst stand called the Best of the Worst. It's no longer there, but it was great bratwurst back in the day. And I was walking over to get myself a dog, and then it's and it finally came to me, and I'm like, okay. And then, but in order for me to have that epiphany, I realized in order for Linda Behrens, and he was typing me using the Berensian model, in order to type me from the Berensian model to be true, that means John Beebe's definitions of cognitive functions had to be true, because I was relying on the traditional definitions of cognitive functions to be an INTJ, with NI being the NE tradition.
There's a lot of ifs. There's a lot of that's a huge chain of logic there. It's I try to stay away from those long chains of logic, because it's a lot of ifs.
There's a lot of risk, man.
And then the other thing is you're really giving a lot of authority on others to decide your type. Like you're giving a lot of authority to your mentor as well in this whole thing. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. But luckily over time, I re-verified my own type probably so often after 2 years, but it's nope, it's still true because of this. Oh, still true because of this. Oh, no, still true because of this. And then starting to, and then my mentor taught me about inverse theory, and that's when it started to make really big sense. And inverse theory is when the cognitive functions, animus theory, which is also a form of inverse theory, your ego becomes your subconscious by flipping upside down, basically, with its cognitive functions, and you are this other type for a temporary amount of time.
Where's this mechanic from? This whole mechanic here, you came up with this, you tested it against other, how do you know that this is real?
So it was real by observing it myself and other people, and how people are transitioning within their own within. And my ESTP mentor, he initially presented 3 sides of the mind, because he's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob has 3 sides because of the Trinity. So also do we as man. That was his approach. That was his bad logic. That was his approach. But my INFJ mentor is no, there's no way that is the case. There's so much more than that, because he knew like when you're looking at John Beebe's model, the demon function, because Beebe didn't really talk about the 4 sides of the mind, but he knew that behaviors coming from the 4 sides of the mind actually came out of that. Now, did my INFJ mentor believe there are 4 sides of the mind? Not necessarily. He just knew that there was the inversing mechanic as presented by the anima and animus theory, which is very deeply rooted in Jung, and it's also rooted in a few others. I mean, even Freud talked about it for a little bit.
I have to admit, there's like a lot of EP tendencies with you. Like you're really channel changing a lot. Like you're it's very EP the way you're talking. I just have to admit that right here. Yeah.
Well, people out there, my biggest critics out there think I'm, like, I don't know. They always say I'm this type or that type. So.
EP. Yeah, more EP than IJ at least. I can definitely see that for sure. Okay, why don't you tell us a little bit about haters and how that whole thing started? Because I know you have a lot of criticism, and I know it's painful. How did you initially deal with it? Because I mean, we're all on YouTube. We all get the haters, right? How did you deal with it? It's painful, right?
Well, I mean, yeah, it is. But the thing is, though, is that like I can at least just ignore that and just keep moving forward. I mean, I'm helping people in their lives. I've saved people from suicide. I've prevented marriages from falling apart. I've given people new perspectives and the tools that they have to be able to move on. So I know that I'm doing a lot of good. So it's nice to be able to wake up every morning and realize that I can do that. But like, I'll admit I'm tempted to give up often. Like many times a month, I'm tempted, maybe I should just not care anymore. You know what I mean? Like I end up doing that, like, cause everyone, I sometimes get accused of, oh, you're doing it for the money. And I'm just like, no, I don't care about money at all. I mean, I don't even mind
What do you care about?
My greatest fear is that I'm going to wake up one day and realize that like I have really poor character. Like I have really poor character. Being a man of good character is really fundamentally important to me. But the thing is that I often self-deprecate for the sake of attempting to have really good character, which is often a problem for me, that I've been struggling with. Now,
does that accompany also like a lot of, can we talk about this stuff? Is it too personal?
Dude, I'm easy, man.
Yeah. So like a lot of self-doubt, confidence issues as well, like that would accompany that?
Not so much. As long as I know what I'm saying is the truth, like I have all the confidence in the world. It's more of me having the struggle between being wise or a fool. Like, because sometimes like it's like I'm doing all of this, but sometimes I'll have feelings of like, oh, okay, maybe I'm being a bad father right now, and then other people have to be like, no, actually, Chase, you're not a bad father because of all these things. It's just so easy to default.
That's a lot of self-doubt. That's a lot of self-doubt. Yeah.
But I have to like, and also like I have huge fear of the unknown issues, like huge fear of the unknown. It's like it's like my biggest thing, but I have to ignore it. And I have to read the books and do the work and just have faith that it's going to work out. That's all it is to it. That's all I can do. That's all I have. Like, I guess you could say I'm basically living on a prayer, and that's all I have. That's all. That's literally all I have. But do I care about the money? Everyone accuses me of caring about the money. I'm like, no, I don't. And they're like, well, you're making so much money. And it's like, yeah, but I also have like 4 families that are, needing this money to continue. And we're moving this team forward and we're changing the world. That's basically
like defending it sort of justifies it in some way as well. Like, I get that everyone needs to make money. And I mean, this is your job. This is your business. There's nothing wrong with wanting to make money. If this is what you're trying to do, this is what you're putting your heart and soul in. So, I mean, like, I don't know if defending it is the right way to go about it, because it's just giving the haters more ammunition. You know what I mean?
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, you're absolutely right. But the thing is that I'm naturally defensive anyway. ENPs are that way, especially ENTPs, because of our extroverted feeling. I mean, it's just
not an excuse, right? I heard.
No, it's not an excuse. It's a struggle. It's a struggle. That's what I'm saying. Like, I know it's probably not the wisest decision to do, but sometimes I just can't help it. But as I get older and as I develop more self-discipline, I realize that, I can let go of those really bad habits. But again, everything is so habitual. Like, I am a very habitual person, and I get upset if I am not able to have a system of habit around what I'm doing.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes sense for an NE
drives
user.
My wife nuts.
Yeah, that makes sense for an NE user too. Tell me though, like, does that feel like an attack on your character as well when people are saying like you're all about the money or attack like that kind of stuff? It feels like they're attacking what you're really insecure about.
I guess it would have to be yes. I think so. Because it's like, but my argument is like, I could just not do this for free. I could just stop. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
exactly. Yeah.
I could just turn off my YouTube channel, just like EJ R&D did. And we all know how everyone still mourns his loss of not being on YouTube and producing the content. Everyone heavily mourns him. I could just do the same and walk away. I've like, if you compare the amount of work that I have behind a paywall versus how much I have available for public, I only have about maybe 10% of my total work behind a paywall. If you actually spend the time to watch the lectures and go through the content, you don't necessarily actually have to do the paywall. You really don't. You can actually come and arrive to all those conclusions on your own if you actually take the time to study, just like I did. And I'm giving anyone that opportunity to be a total autodidact. It's just, if people want to fast track it, okay, then you can look at the videos behind the paywall and fast track it. So
we have a request here for a question. People want to know what you think about OPS as a system.
Okay, so OPS, like, I see where Dave Powers is going from the perspective of 512 subtypes. He's definitely onto something, but the thing is, I don't think it's being well. I don't know. I can't really offer any specific judgments, but I can say, like, here's how it's coming. His cognitive looping and jumper theory is, I love it. It's great. The thing is that I explain why that's happening, and I explain why in season 19, which is behind the paywall, interestingly enough. But basically, the reason why that's happening is because people's cognitive functions develop in different situations and different times in their life, depending on the human nurture that's impacting their nature being their type. And basically, if you're jumping, your parent function. So, for example, my INFJ mentor would be, a TI jumper and he calls it overactive TI child, basically. I call it TI child God complex, but that's another thing. That's more of a criticism. But the point is, it's happening because the parent function is underdeveloped, because it's the parent function or the auxiliary function's job to get between the hero or the dominant function and the child function, because they'll team up without it there. But people don't.
I can see that that's an explanation for sure.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if we're not it's not a danger to maybe isolate these people who Dave seems to think it's 50% of everyone is doing this.
Yeah,
it's like calling the left-handed people sinister.
I think like, more than 50%.
Yeah, I think more. The right hand. It's like, what if this is normal? What if this isn't, like, doesn't need a special explanation?
Yeah, it is normal, and I'd say it's probably higher than 70%. Quite frankly, people that are doing.
Would you be surprised to learn if you were maybe a jumper as well?
I used to be.
Oh, okay.
I'm saying,
so you believe type can change?
I maintain actually everybody is at one point in time in their life. It's just that as they develop because here's the thing, the order of functions that develop in the brain is this way: the hero first, because it's an optimistic function, followed by the child. And they're like a small child, it's hero, and then the child is their optimistic functions. And then the pessimistic functions start developing. So then the inferior function is next, which is actually the fourth function in the stack that starts to develop. I mean, all the functions are there. They're just, some are higher or lower in development, but they don't start developing their auxiliary till adolescence. Say again?
Yeah, that's a good point, but I'm just wondering where you got it from, like this whole theory.
just observation with people within myself and being a parent. And also I used to do like youth ministry with a lot of kids, and I would go on stage and talk and whatnot this is before I completely abandoned church. I would psychoanalyze young high schoolers all the time. And I had access to probably like 200 different kids. And I also like drove a bus to pick up children from homeless shelters, and we'd feed them and, do big presentations at the church, or we'd just play video games for 2 hours because we'd have Modern Warfare 2 when it just came out, and that was fun to play. But the point was I had access to all of these people, and I would do psychological experimentation and testing on all of them, and then use my own anecdotal evidence and also the teachings of my mentors and whatnot to really have all this information available. And I just basically do it in my head, and then I'd write down results that I'd have in my phone, basically, and then just keep testing them over time. I just didn't forget any of those things because it was just, the most important thing to me was this stuff. So.
Do you feel like that all of that mythology of getting to your conclusion, would you stake your life on your conclusions, or this is just
absolutely? Absolutely. Yeah.
Just wow. Okay.
Yes, I would absolutely do it. Not only would I stake my life on it, not only would I do that, but I would also. But if for some reason I'm proven wrong. I will take full responsibility publicly for being proven wrong, and then I will adopt that new idea and adjust things accordingly to that thing.
Really really amazing.
And I have no issue doing that. And I've done it actually recently. And also in season 17, I talked about child development recently, and I had been teaching people something called quadra shifting that I had come up with on my own for a while. But I actually had a conversation with my INFJ mentor like a year ago on the phone. I presented it to him, and he's like, no, it's crap. It's total crap. And I'm like, well, why? And he explained to me, children present to their subconscious. This is actually what's happening. You know what you're talking about. So I went along and I actually tested it and on my own children and others' children. And I started asking people, and I'm like, yeah, he's right. And I had been already telling my audience about this whole time for like at least a year. And I came out publicly on where I presented both theories again in my child development lecture. I had 2 of them in season 17. I'm like, yeah, I'm actually wrong. My bad, guys.
Yeah. It's just when you say things, it feels like you have so much authority behind them. Like you would bet your life on it is exactly what you said now.
Right. But not always, though.
I'll retract. Like it's kind of like this. It's kind of difficult to know what you're actually sure about and what actually is true. Is like I see it's a process. It's a refining process.
Well, sometimes so there are times in my lectures where I say, "Okay, guys, this is a theory. I don't maintain this is true," and I'll actually give a small disclaimer with that. And that happened a lot in season 17. I probably did that more in season 17 than I did any other thing, and I will be doing that more in season 18. Season 18 is the most important lecture series new because it's called Cognitive Mechanics. I'm actually going through all of that. So, but yeah.
We have someone here who wants to understand the structure of your theory. So I'm sure you have somewhere to point them.
Yeah, sure. So csjoseph.life/TypeGrid. You get a free copy of the TypeGrid. It's version 2.0, though. Version 3 is behind a paywall, but version 3 will be made publicly available in the future. So don't worry about that. It'll probably be made available in September or October of this year. Not sure yet. But the TypeGrid is the first main thing, and that is the basis and the foundation of everything. And in order to understand how to use the TypeGrid, you go to my YouTube channel, you watch playlists season 2 and season 15, both of those playlists all the way through. Then you will know how to use the TypeGrid, and then you could type people and yourself from that, or you could just use my personality test when it's available, which follows the same principles, etc. No problem, and that'll be available hopefully on June 1st. Okay, cool. But again, the foundation is Dr. Linda Behrens, which talks about interaction styles and temperaments. Absolutely key.
Yeah.
Technically, David Keirsey. I'm not a fan of Keirsey because his labels are wrong, but his definitions are accurate. So I got to give credit where it's due. I prefer Plato's labels with
Well,
Keirsey's.
I know Behrens is a student of Keirsey as well. Like they work closely
Yes.
together. So in
Yes.
some way, he influenced. You're taking Behrens, so
Yeah,
I guess
and Montgomery was influenced by Behrens.
right.
So you know, again, with the
Still
chain
comes
of
right back
custody.
to Keirsey. Yeah.
Yeah. So it still comes back to Keirsey. Again, I have to give credit where it's due. And then Dr. John Beebe and his definitions of the functions, as well as the cognitive attitudes, and a little bit of Jung, especially when he's talking about the collective unconscious, and then also the anima approach, according to Jung and some others. Almost everybody in the chain of custody has talked about the animus thing. So I can't exactly identify who the original person was who talked about anima versus animus, because I could even trace some of that talking all the way back to like Hippocrates, for example.
Oh, okay, I see. All right, yeah.
So even the early Greeks were talking about it a little bit.
I think it's even in biblical origin as well, with Adam and Eve being one and then splitting or something like that as well.
I agree with that. I agree with that.
We have a bunch of comments here asking about sperm. Do you know what they're talking about?
Okay, so what they're talking about is how I presented a metaphysical example about how, you know, the head and the spine is in the same shape of a sperm. And basically what I'm saying is that in that moment, you know, when it comes to like, where do people inherit like their cognition? Do they get it from the sacred masculine or do they get it from the sacred feminine? Right? There's no way to physically prove this. It's just a theory. It's just a theory. But but the argument is that, you know, the brain, the central nervous system, the mind basically ultimately comes from the masculine contribution to creating a human being, and not the feminine contribution to the human being. That's all that really was. But does it actually have any basis in like scientific, like actual facts? No, it doesn't. But then again,
I guess what you're getting at is type is somewhat genetic in some way, and it does come from both.
I have to say that I mean, I don't have any other way to say that it's not. I don't have evidence to say that it is. There's no inductive reasoning behind it. But from a deductive standpoint, I have to say that it is genetic. I just don't know how, you know what I mean? But there's no inductive way to prove it using the scientific method, not yet. And again, like you were saying, like, how are you going to verify all this in a concrete manner, in a physical way? The answer to that, I want to partner up with Dario Nardi using my inputs from the TypeGrid through his process of identifying people's, you know, through his neuroscience approach, and then see what the results say. I think the results will be far more valuable. I mean, even his evidence, I mean, he even came out recently saying that, you know, like, yeah, there's definitely evidence for cognitive transition. He didn't call it cognitive transition, but what he was saying is basically saying the same thing. You know what I'm saying? You know, so.
Yeah, no, it's definitely an interesting day and age to be in this field. Especially you as one of the gatekeepers to this, where most people who come into this come through you in some way. It's a huge responsibility.
Certainly.
And I think the type community, even the haters, at least owe a little bit of debt to you in the work you've been doing.
I'm not sure they'd ever claim that, but fair enough.
Yeah, but I'm sure they do. I'm sure they know it in some way. I'm wondering if you're going to end up spending a little bit more time with us, hanging out more with us people in the greater type community, coming out to other people's channels and stuff.
I mean, that's fine. I keep having experiences where I get a request from a YouTuber, like, and then all of a sudden I'm like, no, I'm not going to do it. And then they have a video bashing me the following week. So it's kind of like, okay, like, guys, I'm busy. And also when those requests came in, I was also working like, it wasn't a 9 to 5, it was more than that. I was working 12 hours a day on top of running the YouTube channel at the same time. So it's like, I didn't have any time. And a lot of people took it very personally when I wasn't accepting their requests to go on their shows and whatnot, you know? So, and there's some shows that I'd probably be interested in. And there's some of them that I'm just absolutely like, this is it just seems like a total waste of time. And again, it's just not just me making these decisions either. Like I got people and advisors on my team that are also like,
you do.
Yeah, I do. I mean,
So you think together with other people on your team, like you don't make all the decisions by yourself.
At the end of the day, I have the final word, but I also rely on other people. And people that I allow on my team, I've chosen people on my team specifically to be there to say no to me. Like actually, there's more people on my team that are psychologically incompatible with me than there are people who are compatible. There's only one person on my team that's actually compatible. Everyone else is actually not compatible with me specifically.
Yeah, you must have a lot of problems out like that if you're so incompatible with your team. If you pick people.
And in fact, it was the compatible person that told me, you need to go on Benjamin's show. And I'm like, yeah, really? And like, yes, you need to go on his show. Are you sure? Yes.
Awesome.
Okay,
well,
I'll go on his show.
That guy. What's his name?
that's why I contacted you, is because he told me you need to go on his show. Okay. Oh, yes, sir.
What's the guy's name? Can I say hi to him?
There's no way I could share that. He'd get really mad at me if I did.
Tell him to send me an email and say what's up. I'd love to say
fair enough. Fair enough.
If he sees it, anyways.
Yeah.
Anyways,
thank you very
much. Okay. Thank you very much, Chase, for coming out. Like, I really appreciate it. It's a rare occasion that you're coming out to the rest of the community like this, and I hope it continues. I hope we can have you out again at some point.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I'd be willing to come again if necessary. I mean, it's no problem.
Yeah, awesome, man.
If you have any other specific questions or you want to follow up to this, or I don't know, maybe you can ask your audience to come up with a bunch of questions, and then we could just do like a 30-minute Q&A with, and with your audience or whatever. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, it's a great idea. I just want to cut it short because we're running over the hour, and people have short attention spans these days and stuff. So.
All good. You know me. I'll go for 3 hours. I'm trying to fix that. That's why I have the other YouTube channel, okay? I'm trying to fix that.
Cool, man. A couple of people are asking you what my type is, but I don't expect you to type me right now, unless you know it already, but it's okay.
Honestly, I've actually chosen to go out of my way to not do that because I wanted this to be as natural as possible. I have respect for you. So,
thank you, man. Anyways, have a good one, everyone. Thanks for watching. And check out Chase's stuff. Links in the description. Have a good one.
Later.